the theme of this session is, how do you get a job in a field that's going to move social justice forward? Before we go to the panel, I want to introduce Valerie Savior, who directs our Price School Office of Career Services, to explain what that office does and can do for you. So Valerie?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to see so many new and familiar faces. I really just want to be brief, as Lavana was as well, and start by thanking Marlon and Terrence for putting together this slate of professionals. It's critical to give students access to such inspiring professionals across occupational pathways. So from our office, if you are a Price student, please look for our newsletter coming out soon. We also have a wide array of panels, workshops, and events that feature Trojans in the world of work across all the disciplines our students study. We offer tailored one-on-one advising via Zoom. Please take advantage of individualized support for your career trajectory. And almost everything that we do, you'll be able to see by just tracking our newsletter. We have 2 new series we're launching this year: Virtually Speaking and an Insight series. These are just, again, similar to this, ways to put you in front of professionals. And I just want to acknowledge 2 of my colleagues on the call today: Dominic Aletto, who's has his picture up right now. There he is, our Associate Director, and Seta Kennedy, our other Associate Director. These are the people on our team who work very closely with employers, prospective employers, and alumni to source programming and opportunities. So thank you again, Marlon.
Valerie, thank you so much. So yeah, I just want to reinforce, be in touch with both our Associate Dean Lavana Lewis and Valerie Savior and the Office of Career Services. They are resources. And you should see in front of you a quick poll. And what we want you to do is to just kind of answer to describe who you are. And I think once we do that, we will probably get to see the results soon. And so if you could go ahead and answer that, I think that will help our panelists kind of understand how they might tailor their responses. And so we're just trying to understand if you're an undergraduate, master's student, or whatnot. So that's in front of you. And as soon as that's totaled up, I think we'll distribute the results. I want to ask the panel an initial question, and what I will do is call on you in turn to take about 3 minutes, which is not a lot of time. It's the amount of time you would get, right, if you were testifying at a public hearing. And so 3 minutes to do the following, to tell us what you do and how you got where you are. And in particular, anything that would be helpful to students to help them understand a career path or networking ideas, or as you see fit, key skills that you would recommend to students that they should be on the lookout for, develop for careers in social justice. And so I'm gonna go in the reverse order of how you are appearing on my screen. So if I got this right, we're going to Richard Avilés first. So Richard, you're gonna kick us off.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on this panel. It is great to be here again. But it's so funny that I get this question first as someone who just graduated like last year. But I think so, a little bit of what I do, I identify as arts and culture planner, but at this moment, I work for LA DOT, the Department of Transportation for Vision LA, doing community engagement work. And on top of that, my former background is in community organizing. So I have about 15 years of experience as an organizer. And I guess I started at 15. So half of my life I've been an organizer. And I think a lot of, what's helping me right now is really understand my own truth, right? So I do come with an experience of 15 years, but no longer am I commanding that experience as credentials and credibility, but rather as privilege. And I only say that to say, because even for myself as a non-Black person of color, I'm understanding my positionality to white supremacy and also my positionality to blackness and how am I moving things forward? So I say that to say that it's really important for always being a learner and a student, right? So most of my work and my expertise comes from the art world. I literally just recently had some things go viral that now like I'm friends with the rapper named Kehlani. And I was like, how did this happen? I don't know. But now there's an opportunity to really integrate my work in urban planning and the arts in a way that we're moving forward. So I think in addition to that, I would only add when it comes to networking, don't burn bridges you haven't crossed yet. So one thing I am learning as I work in the Department of Transportation, as much as I hate respectability politics, reputation is quite interesting. I have seen a lot of ways in which the bureaucracy is good and the way that it's not so good. And understanding who your allies are within a system is very important, because this work is in the long term, right? So I come from a background of civil disobedience and organizing. A lot of, at the time I was young, I had nothing to lose. So I was like, arrest me for disobedience. Things are a little different now that I'm almost 30, right? And so now is really understanding that this work in the words of Nipsey Hussle, the marathon continues. So I need to ensure that my body, my spirit, and my mind is really set for the long term. So building those strategic relationships is very important.
Richard, thank you. That's fantastic advice. And really important. This is something that I think a lot of us are struggling with now, is, you know, how to build, be sure that we're building for the long term. Before the next person we'll go to with the same question is Aida. But before we do that, I understand we have the poll results available. And so here they are. They should be right in front of you on your screen. So it looks like we are about 22% undergraduate or progressive degree students, 16% master students with 2 years of work experience. And then it looks like about half of our attendees right now or more have 2 years or more work experience. So a pretty diverse group. And I think each of you can kind of click close on that. And so we're really talking kind of across a whole range of experience. Aida, really the same question. Who are you? What do you do? And tell us the story of how you got there.
Okay, well, thank you all first so much for having me. It's been a little while. I don't want to say how many years, but it's been a while. So happy to be back with our Trojan family. So who am I? I am the daughter of political refugees from Ethiopia. I am also a wife and now new mother and many other things to many people, a daughter, sister, so on. And like Richard, have spent the bulk of my life and career community organizing, working for SEIU, Service Employees International Union, with PICO, so faith-based organizing, labor organizing, all kinds of campaigns, political campaigns. And it was through that burnout that brought me to USC, wanting to connect the grassroots to the grass tops, or so I thought. And getting, I got my master's in public policy and had the amazing privilege of being a TA to Dr. Lewis, which just enhanced my experience. And, you know, have always been critical of every place I've ever been. So I grew up in a pretty rural, racist, white community called Apple Valley. It's in the middle of nowhere. If you blink, you'll miss the whole city. And like, there were swastikas spray painted on our garage doors, super clear at a young age. We were not welcome. Go on, you know, every educational experience never taught me about myself or my heritage or my history, you know, or, you know, just the realities of living in America, so on and so forth. And coming to USC, we had similar critiques. Lamika and I were classmates, and I'm sure she'll speak a little bit to that, but, you know, we had critical lens to, you know, why don't we have a race and public policy class? At least, well, I hope that has changed, but that was a question, right, we had. And that sort of approach has led me to create Decolonize Design, my company, that primarily does sort of two categories of work, which is critique community organizing and how it centers on white heteronormative approaches to everything, and what we call the diversity, equity, and inclusion industrial complex. So we have a sort of critique of that. And we work with corporations and in the public sector to really transform and really question the status quo using African and other indigenous approaches. And so my experience at USC was the sort of intellectual freedom I had to really explore and have amazing teachers and just that kind of emotional support that frankly I went to UC Berkeley undergrad, didn't have it there, really have never had it anywhere else. And you really can't put a price or a sort of put value on that. And some of my closest friendships and sisterhoods have come, like Lamika, from that. And so I think the most important thing as we think about you'll learn a lot, of course, but it is relationships. I mean, that's the number one thing. And networking to me is sterile. I'm not a big fan of networking as a concept, but I do think that building relationships is so important, and the Trojan Mafia is real, and I support it and subscribe to it. And so I think that's a quick overview. Professor Barnett, I hope I answered all the questions.
That is fantastic. That was wonderful. And there's so much I'd want to talk about in there, but let me go first to the next three people. By the way, as we do this, after we go through a round of questions, we're going to have an opportunity to take question and answers from you, the students, as audience members. So if you have questions, you can chat those either to Terrence Rucker, or I think Terrence, maybe to Dom Aletto, but I think, or to everyone. And Terrence will be canvassing, and Dom, to try to kind of organize those questions, and and they may indeed have to pick things that may hit on themes that would be appealing to a lot of students. So if you kind of use the chat box as those strike you. Next, I want to go to Lamika Castillo, and Lamika was one of the first people who I met when I arrived at USC, and was kind of brand new. They told me that there was this planning program that I should direct, and I have to say, when I met Lamika was one of the first moments that I realized that there was something pretty special happening here at the Price School. And that's a credit to Lamika. Lamika, I want to have the same question. Who are you? What do you do? And maybe what are the key kinds of either skills or habits that you would recommend that students begin to adopt?
Great. Yes, thank you, Professor Burnett. And I just have to say, again, I'm honored to be on this panel as well. I sit here coming after Richard, who was actually one of my students, because I am a professor in the policy school and adjunct faculty member, and I used to teach the on-campus programs before, we didn't have an on-campus program anymore. And then also, as Aida mentioned, we are good friends. We met as students at Price and have continued our relationship, and I adore her, and we are new moms together and like walking through this. And then also Professor LaVonna Lewis, what I already said in the chat, we all love you and adore you. Thank you so much just for how you coached and cultivated and loved on so many people over all these years. I can't believe, I wouldn't tell y'all, but we graduated almost a decade ago. So there we are. I almost put that up. So anyhow, so about me, yes, I'm a Price alum. I also went to UC as an undergraduate. I went to UC San Diego. My family is from South Central Los Angeles and also from Panama, so we call ourselves South Central Americans. I grew up in South LA, moved to Inglewood, and when you ask the question, how did you get into this career? It's like social justice. I feel like it's actually been my whole life, right? So social justice is my life, and my career is just a part of my life and my calling in this world, which is to seek justice. My son's name is Justice, by the way. My 10-month-old baby's name is Justice. So in case you can't tell, this is something I'm very passionate about. So before I get into like my work, I will say that I think all of my life experiences have really shaped my trajectory to where I am now and continue to shape the work that I do in the space that I'm in and any space that I'm in, right? So I didn't necessarily go out seeking a social justice career. I just make everything I do centered around social justice. So when I was in undergrad, I did a lot of work with, you know, the faculty and also the dean. I know Dean Jack Knott just left the institution. But I remember students getting together with Dean Knott to say, why don't we have not just a race and politics class or race and policy, but why don't we have a social justice focus to begin with, right? Why are we not doing more in the community? Why are we not connecting? We're right here in South Central Los Angeles. What is the policy school doing to really engage the community and cultivate leaders from the community to come here and then go out and change the world? And so the social justice concentration and like this focus, the Center for Innovation, all of those things came out of students really pushing for that in the university. And we didn't have to push that hard. Like Aida mentioned, we had some really phenomenal professors. We had a lot of support, but folks just didn't know. They were like, what do? We don't know how to get there. We would love your support. And there were some faculty who said, I do know how to get there, but we really need the students to be the ones pushing, right? And so it was this marriage between the faculty who were already on board and wanting to do this, students who were really eager to have it happen, and then faculty who really did care but just weren't sure the direction to go in. And so I will say that a lot of that experience that I had as a student at the Price School and even more challenging experiences in my undergraduate institution where there wasn't as much support, all of that has really prepared me for the work that I do now. So I do have my own consulting firm as well. It's called Castillo Consulting Partners. And we do leadership development with a racial justice lens, if you will, like an anti-racism lens. We do use the term the diverse, equity, include. Actually, we use equity, inclusion, diversity, and access. We are planners, right? I'm a planner by training, so access is critical. But recognizing that that terminology is problematic, but that is the entry point into a lot of these spaces where they're not thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the ways that I think that they should be, or we believe and know that they should be. Because if they were, we would have a completely different world, and we wouldn't need a social justice focus because it would just be infused into everything. So I guess I don't want to go on forever and ever. I'm sure we'll be able to talk more, but I just wanted to say that with regards to the skill set, it really was my upbringing and background. And I think if you don't come from a community, like a low income community, if you don't come from a community of color, that does not mean that you cannot do this work. It just means that you really have to work hard to have empathy and more than empathy, like really get close, proximate to the communities to understand what the communities are going through and figure out how to lift their voices up and give them the space to advocate on their own behalf versus us doing that work for the community. So that's a little bit about me, my advice, and I'm looking forward to learning more from you all about why you want to do this work.
Lamika, thank you. Next, I want to give the floor to Jackie lllum. And Jackie, the same kind of thing. Tell us what you're doing and kind of a little bit about your career path and any skills you'd recommend to students or other techniques. So, Jackie?
Sure, thank you. And also thank you. I'm already I'm just like smiling and nodding the whole time because everything everyone's saying is amazing. So I actually took a really strange path to the career I currently have. I started out as a neuroscientist and I worked at a children's hospital where I actually was seeing that the kids that were coming in with different childhood obesity and diabetes was the type of lab I was working in. And I just felt like there were so many reasons that didn't have anything to do with their bodies that was bringing them into this office. And that brought me to a career in policy and planning. So I do have a master's degree from Price in urban planning because I felt like I didn't want to use medicine. Medicine is incredibly important and it plays into my career to this day, but it's not the thing that is the most important. Giving someone a medicine or treating their illnesses doesn't give them a good quality of life. It doesn't address any of the equity issues that we see. And something about working in that hospital made really clear to me how big the injustices were, and it was not something I could sit with any longer. So I went to Price, and I think the most important job I've ever had to this day, for me personally at least, was actually working with Dr. Sloan and Dr. Lewis. After I graduated, we were evaluating 2 large CDC community health grants, and the grants were being implemented by coalitions of community-based organizations across the city of Los Angeles. They're big and complicated, and I could spend like 10 years talking about them. But just to say that I learned so much just working with the community members, working with community organizers, and working with different sort of leaders across the issues of social determinants of health. And that has brought me to my current job as the Director of Research and Evaluation at Mockingbird Analytics, which is a smaller organization that provides nonprofit management and evaluation services to small nonprofits that are just getting started. Because of my advocacy and social justice background as well, I sort of help develop that stuff at Mockingbird. And for me, I do want to give some skills and maybe some networking. I agree that empathy is incredibly important, as well as humility and active listening. So I can't tell you like how many times I've been in meetings where planners or other professionals think they know what's going on. They don't really listen to the community. They're just very dismissive, and it's a huge disservice. It's really inappropriate. It's uncomfortable. And I, like, everything I've learned besides coming from the amazing faculty at Price has come from the communities that I've worked with. I was lucky to be the evaluator in the room for a long time because I could actually just sit and be quiet and learn. But I think it's really important to just humble yourself, especially as you're walking into someone else's community or someone else's life, and learn from them. Because people have so much information to share with you if you'll actually listen. And having a research background, I think analytical skills will take you very far. There's always a million proposals and solutions to the challenges that we're facing. And I think having those skills, a little bit of analytical skills and critical thinking, will actually help you understand what is best for the communities that you're trying to work with. And in terms of networking, just quickly, I think, so I'm really mission driven, and I have a very, I'm incredibly passionate about the work that I do. So for me, it's always really important to find a job and a workplace that fits that culture and has that mission. So I've worked in jobs that have a public health and planning focus that actually don't really care about people. And that's sort of really terrible. I won't name names, but I think it's important to figure out who and what you care about, and then get to know those people through volunteer opportunities, interning, joining coalitions, things like that, that really help you to understand where you'll fit in best.
Jackie, thank you. Thank you so much. Jessica, you are last but not least in this round. So tell us what you do, where you're working, how you got there, and whatever advice you would offer to these students.
Sure. Thank you all for being here. I'm honored to be here and to be amongst these other panelists and to learn more about them as well. I am from Baltimore. My undergraduate degree was in social psychology, and I discovered urban planning as I was a real estate appraiser. I worked full-time through undergrad. It took me 8 years. So I was working and I was in the field as I was discovering my undergraduate path. And in Baltimore, you can be on one block and step onto the next block and feel like you're in a whole other world. And no less the state as a whole, just witnessing the disparities and the differences and hearing people's stories as you go into their homes really just exposed me to a lot of curiosity about the community conditions and what will drive people to be engaged in their communities. So I went on to serve in the Peace Corps as a community and organizational development advisor in Eastern Europe, and then came straight out and then got my master's from Price in planning in the social and community planning concentration. And I'm currently an associate with PlaceWorks, which is a planning and design firm. I specialize in community engagement, strategic partnerships, and policy writing. The advice that I would give, I mean, it's everything that Richard said and Aida said about, well, one, your reputation and relationships, but also not forcing networking. Those all come together. So for me, when I work with a lot of community-based organizations, I'm organically networking with them for my personal self and for us in future collaborations. So I know this CBO did a really great job. So when I have a future project, I call them. And I've had CBOs work on projects, they don't even know the context of it. And so I really focus on building those relationships personally, regardless of where I work in the future. Those CBO relationships are mine. I've built this relationship. It's my reputation. So they trust me, I trust them, and I can carry that forward, and I can, you know, build on these coalitions and help bring organizations together. And then making phone calls and just being bold, really. I mean, I think, Marlon, you could correct me if I'm wrong, that I'm on this panel because I called Marlon, you know, a month or so ago and said, you know, I was emotionally charged and said, what's going on at USC? How is Price going to address some of these things? What can I do to be involved? And with no clear goal necessarily in mind, other than to check in with someone I knew and to see what was the plan for this organization that I'm affiliated with, and what more can I do to contribute to the cause. And so just letting people know where you're at and where you're coming from and what you're centered on can go a long way in building those relationships and doing that organic networking. I would say for exploring career paths, don't put yourself in a box. I don't work for a firm that brands themselves as doing social justice work. And much of the social justice work I do is from the inside. And that might mean at times I am the only one with a social justice lens, and I have to push my own team. And so knowing that and being open to not necessarily just nonprofit organizations or organizations that really brand themselves as working towards social justice and inclusion, but understanding that there's a lot of firms and agencies that aren't structured that way, but they need socially justice minded people to be working there. Because if not, then it's like us against them, right? So you have to kind of try to get in there and be open and be the change within. And for those of us operating from a place of privilege, whether it's based on our race or other access, yes, you have to be mindful of your reputation, but at the same time, if I stay centered on what I know is the truth and what I'm about, I have to let that reputation go, because there could be people right now saying that I'm bold or I'm difficult, and I can't be bothered with that because I'm centered in what I'm about. So being bold enough to have those uncomfortable conversations and call and sending the uncomfortable email and making people uncomfortable, frankly, this is the time to do it. And if you're going to enter this work, you should really be bold enough to do it, especially if you're operating from a place of privilege.
Jessica, thank you. Thank you so much. And you are a little bit right. When you contacted me earlier in the summer and said, what's going on? What is Price doing in this moment? What it did was reminded me of your commitment. So when I was thinking about this panel, I thought, aha, well, here's somebody who I know is committed to this. And so, let's see, we're getting a few questions in, or at least we have one. And so I'm going to read the following question that came to us. And what I would say is I'm just going to actually ask any of you to jump in on the panel. So the question is, outside of a regulatory framework, what is the process for monetizing a career around social justice and inclusion?
See, I'm still conditioned by the classroom. I was like, oh, me.
I like it.
I would just be very mindful of what it means to say to monetize around social justice and inclusion, because for me, this work, I mean, even to be on this panel, I was like, well, I mean, I kind of do social justice within the Department of Transportation, but doing this I want to do within the Department of Transportation, girl, I would have been out a long time ago. But I get to do that through my art. So I just be very mindful in how we use what it means to monetize, because for me, like, as an artist, I have the privilege to create perception. Then as a queer person of color, it is my mandate to create perception that is just. So though there is an opportunity for me to be in spaces and to get compensated for the work that I do, I never think about monetizing this work, because that's not the intention. Not about me. It's about the liberation of my communities, about my Black and brown siblings. And so I always use that, right? To the point that Jessica made earlier. Like, I know I have to be very centered and aligned, and I never allow myself, my ambition to turn into greed, because the moment that it turns into greed, that is what led us to the white supremacist society that we live in today. So I just be very mindful in how we balance that.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to throw this question also to Aida and Lamika, because you've both formed your own companies. So how do you, tell us how you go about that?
I can start. You want me to start, sis?
Sure, you got this.
I can start because I was wrestling with this question because the fact of the matter is I didn't start my business to monetize it. I started the business because it was very difficult to do the work that I wanted to do within the confines of the businesses that exist, right? Whether that be in the public sector, private, or nonprofit sector. And I've worked in all three, right? We're all about the public-private partnerships. Do we still do that, Price? We don't talk about that in my classes, but I know that that is like the thing, right? I know we're all about the PPPs or 3Ps, whatever. And so the reason that I started this company with my husband was not to just monetize the work. Actually, it wasn't about monetizing the work at all. In fact, the model that we use for our business is that every project that we get, every partner that we work with, we always look for folks from the community to actually do the work so that they are able to build the skills, because a lot of them don't have access, right? They don't have access to USC. They don't have access to institutions of higher learning where, you know, I had privileges and access. I love what Jessica said, right? Use the privileges you had. I was able to gain certain privileges because of my education. And I know so many of the young people that I've worked with over time have not had access to those same privileges for a lot of different reasons, coming from similar backgrounds to my own, being in the foster care, you know, in the foster care system, having incarcerated parents, being Black. All of those things are barriers to people's access to information that would give them an opportunity to do work that they're passionate about, or just to get a job, period. So rather than thinking about this as a way to monetize, I thought, to Richard's point, right? Like, how do I uplift my people, and how do I make sure that I'm creating opportunities for other folks to get access to skills and knowledge and information, and then also give them the relationships like Jessica was talking about. They now have relationships with the clients that we work with. And we have over 4 dozen that we work with right now, right? I mean, we have a lot of different organizations we work with, big names, small names. And I have young people who themselves were recently released from prison and were looking for opportunities. And I'm like, we have a client who is trying to figure out how do they serve a population of recently, you know, like people who were recently released from prison. You have that experience. You should be the one educating them about this, not me. And so how do we give you that access? So that's the perspective we take. It's not about how much money can we give, you know, how do we optimize our whatever. I'm on vacation right now. So my brain isn't working all the way, but that's what I want to say about that.
Very good.
Yeah, you said a lot of what I would share, and I'm going to speak for you, I think, a little bit on this point. I really struggle with racial capitalism, right, as a concept that we're all participating in.
Mm-hmm.
And I work with corporations, and they talk about being corporate activists, and I'm like, that's oxymoronic. Or, you know, compassionate capitalism, and all these other, in my opinion, euphemisms, because it is predicated on exploitation. It's kind of this inherent tension in the work. Now, when I think about monetizing, to Lamika's point, I think, you know, you can't pour from an empty cup. So we are very clear as a company that, like, we are a boutique firm that probably charges more than a lot of other people. And we have a primarily Black team. And I believe in paying people very well. As a part of that, Lamika hit this point, but in our strategic advising, we have, for instance, one retail client where we want to create a mandate, frankly, around hiring people who have been formerly incarcerated and bringing them into apprenticeship programs. So creating structural change versus symbolic change. What we see a lot with, like, some of our work doing inclusion or social justice work is like, oh, you know, we'll write a Black Lives Matter letter. We'll give you Juneteenth off. That's symbolic, right? So when I think about the monetization, it's obviously not just like how we pay people and, you know, what we do inside the confines of our job, but like, how are you as a company compensating people? How are you hiring people? And really extending that mindset beyond our organization. And, you know, Lamika, I think I can speak to Castillo Consulting in that they're disruptive. Like, part of monetization and adding your value is being disruptive to the industry and really bringing a different perspective, questioning the status quo, and pushing people, you know, Lamika is an expert, right? So pushing people and guiding people to where they need to go is, I think, it's the path least traveled, but it's certainly a path towards monetization, in my opinion.
Thank you, thank you. The questions are really rolling in now. And so thank you to all of you, although I don't know if we're going to get to them all. But what I want to do, one of the very next question touched on some things that I think you've already said. And the next question is, have you had any resistance to community engagement or social justice initiatives at your workplaces? And I want to first bounce that to people who have not yet spoken. So Jessica, I want to start with you, and then I'll go to Jackie, and then we'll just let folks jump in. But Jessica?
Almost every day of my life. Almost every day. Yeah, yes, and it ranges from blatant to complete ignorance. And I think something I've really realized over the last few months is a lot of people are really operating from a deep deficit of knowledge. They're really showing their ignorance in ways, and some of them are showing their ignorance with a genuine interest in breaking out of that ignorance, and others are just showing their ignorance. So there's a full range of it, and I think that won't go away overnight. And it takes a lot of patience and meeting people where they're at to kind of break through with that. But like we've already mentioned, staying centered. So they can say I'm disruptive and I'm a troublemaker and I'm loud, whatever it is. I don't care. I'm going to keep consistent with what I'm working on and what I'm working for. As frustrating as it can be, especially if you do end up in an organization that's, like I said, is not necessarily branded towards social justice and inclusion. If they as an organization aren't working towards that, but you've inserted yourself within it and are committed to helping to be that change within it, then you just have to know that that's part of the work, is creating change from within.
That's fantastic. And let me mention, I think I'll probably just go to all the panelists, that Jessica, you already touched on it, because I was going to say, and if you have seen resistance, what do you do? So and Jessica, you touched on that. But let me go to Jackie. What's your experience been?
So I have been quite fortunate to have a handful of jobs that have been amazing and really push for this racial justice and inclusion. But I did have a job for, I think I lasted like 9 months until I had to like run away screaming. Actually fled the country when it ended. But it was a job in a working in research in public health, and it was really problematic the way that people would talk about just people didn't believe that someone might live in Los Angeles County on like $20,000 a year, and people didn't understand what the lived experience of, you know, Black Angelenos and Brown Angelenos was. And it was extremely uncomfortable to be not only the new person in the room, but the only person in the room that would speak up. But I felt like, especially as a white person, that I needed to, like, couldn't tolerate it. So I did speak up a lot until the point that I had to leave. I did give a lot of feedback to HR on why I was leaving. That was quite frank. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if this institution has changed based on some following up on social media that I've seen. But I do think, you know, to me, this is something that it's not, it doesn't matter whether you're working in somewhere, the place I currently work doesn't explicitly have social justice in its mission, but it's something that the founder finds really important. And so I, you know, make it a point to just speak up whenever I can. We have a pretty good group of people, but finding ways to train people. And I'm also a big fan of lifting up other voices where possible. So again, like I have plenty of expertise, but I'm also a white person, and so not always the best to talk about, you know, the lived experiences of other people. So I try to make sure that I'm bringing in my network and my, you know, colleagues and people that I know that can speak to these things and help educate and train others. But the pushback is hard, especially I feel like in the people don't want to hear that they're, you know, wrong or that they have bad thoughts. But I think that it's important because I did find there was a little bit of transformation in some of my colleagues at that really terrible job because I was able to speak up. And so I think it's always worth the risk, for sure. The risk of, you know, feeling like the outsider, but important.
Lamika, Aida, Richard, resistance, and if so, what do you do?
Thrive in resistance. I don't know. As organizers, they say, you know, there's no growth without tension. So it's invited, I guess, or that's how I know we're on the right path. I'll let Lamika and Richard speak.
Yeah, I was actually thinking if we don't experience resistance, then I feel like I'm in the wrong place, or I'm not doing my job right, or yeah, I'm not doing my job. Like that's not the right place. The work that we do is, as Aida mentioned so eloquently, to be disruptors, right? We're disrupting the status quo. We're disrupting white supremacy. We're disrupting anti-Blackness. We're disrupting racism in this country. My job on this earth is to bring liberation to my people. And that in and of itself is uncomfortable for everybody else around me, right? Including some of my people. They're like, what are you doing? I need you to not do that. Or I actually need you to do that. But it's challenging for me to sit here and have you do that, because I don't know, like, what is that gonna mean for us? Is it gonna get us further than we are now? And so that I always keep that in mind, right? Like, anybody who's taken my classes before, I always tell folks, one of the norms for my class is you need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And if you are sitting in my class and you're feeling comfortable, there's no tension, then you're not learning anything, and I'm failing as an educator. I see Richard nodding. Richard has been in my class before, and Richard knows I don't intentionally try to make people uncomfortable. It's just the fact that the matter is that this work is uncomfortable, and it's not just the work that's uncomfortable. The idea that, you know, we live in a white supremacist, heteronormative society, a patriarchal society, is uncomfortable for people to say. And I know that my existence as a Black woman who wears her hair like this, right, who has no problem speaking up, makes people uncomfortable, and there will be resistance against that. So how has resistance showed up? For me, I will say early in my career, I was told before that my hair was unprofessional, and so that I need to fix it if I wanted to get a job, right? That is resistance to me being Black and being who I am. I always tell people it's the way God made me. I think God gave me this beautiful crown, and I should wear it the way that I so please. But the fact of the matter is, right, we had to get a law passed in California just in 2019 because there's so much discrimination against folks who wear their hair like mine and Aida's, as you see on the screen right now. So that is resistance in, like, even just trying to get my foot in the door. Other resistance that I see is when I'm talking to clients about, I will do an internal audit of their policies, practices, and procedures. I always pull out my, policy hat from the Price School, and I'm like, let me look at your policies. And it's very benign. And then I'm like, this is racist, this is racist, this is white supremacist. And they're like, oh my gosh, clutch my pearls, what are you talking about? And then I say, even you will listen to me because I have a degree from the Price School, but you won't listen to this person who has a degree from Cal State Northridge. That is not okay. How is it that person went in that direction? Why is it they went in that direction? Did they all have access to Price? I had access to Price because of, and it wasn't really because of who I was, it was because I met with some faculty and they thought that I was great. And, I had my community organizing background. And I mean, I'm not trying to diminish myself as a person, but the fact of the matter is I would not have gone to college if it were not for the supports of so many other people. And I had the opportunity to work full-time like Jessica did right through college. And I know that that's not true for other people. And so if they couldn't do that, then they don't have this pedigree. And I always, I'm always like, fight on Trojans. If y'all ever want to work with me, let me know. I don't have a whole lot of jobs yet, but I know that's one of the questions that's going to come. But the reason I bring that up is to say the types of resistance that I see is around, well, this person isn't the right fit for the company, or this person was not polished enough in the interview. And I call people on it. What does that mean? They're not polished enough, right? That is racism built into your policy, because what is polished? They're not the right culture fit for the company. Why aren't they the right culture fit? What is the right culture fit? What does that mean? So I come across that resistance all the time, and I like so many of the other panelists said, I definitely speak up and say, hey, I just want to let you know, right? Calling you in love, but also need to let you know that this is upholding systems of white supremacy, because what you're doing is you're perpetuating these ideas that certain standards need to be applied across the board, and that's actually not what needs to happen here. So that's one of the ways.
Thank you. Richard?
Yeah, I'll just add one thing, totally in agreement with what everyone has mentioned. I think that for me in particularly, I've met a lot of resistance, and I think getting a city council member mad was my first moment where I got someone and I was like, uh-oh. But I think also just being the person that I am and being so understanding what institutions and systems can do, there was a moment of anxiety that came over me and I was like, oh my God, this is it. Oh my God, they're coming for me. And I think one thing helped me a lot has been setting boundaries and understanding when boundaries, not as limitations, but rather invitations. So for me, it's been really helpful to be able to continue to my craft as an artist, because when things are happening within the department, like my art becomes that place where I can find the most joy and continue the work in the long haul. And so, but some of those boundaries have been come through where coworkers have been like, Richard, you should invite us to one of your performances. And I say, no, I compartmentalize my life. And those two things are very separate because I may just, you know. So I think it's been really helpful to do that sort of work there. And a lot of the resistance that I get also comes from doing community engagement, in the sense that at least in the planning process, we're always doing community engagement at the pre-design and design phase of a project, but never during construction, which to me, it's the longest phase of a design project and the phase when community feels the most impact. And then already there, you're beginning to see what the intention is when we're doing a community engagement, which is only buy-in and it's never sort of collaborative efforts. So that's a lot of the resistance that I get where folks are talking about racial equity. I say, I want a budget that reflects that same ethos that you're preaching, because then it just becomes lip service. And so because of all those resistance, I always just remind myself of what do I think my notion of trouble is and what my sort of risk is. When there's so many things that are going around, when trans women are being murdered at the rates at which they are murdered, where my siblings are being murdered at the rate at which they're being murdered, me speaking up, it's not so troublesome for me. So I think it's that taking that risk, but also those boundaries, because sometimes being always in that positionality can be very daunting for the spirit. So as long as my spirit is not, you know, they're not messing with my spirit, then I'll continue the long haul.
And you won't win every battle. I'll just add that. You won't win every one. And even if you only make a little tiny bit of progress, you can still view that as a success and know that you're going to be coming right back the next day or the next project or the next occurrence to keep chipping away at it.
Thank you. Thank you. This is fantastic. I am so glad that you are joining us. So unfortunately, we have 10 minutes left and I have to be the timekeeper. And I say that because I would love to let this go much longer, but that would be wrong of me somehow as the moderator. And so let me try to close with a couple of things. One, we have many good questions that have come in that I'm not going to be able to get to, but so I'm going to try to do a hybrid thing to maybe close. One would be a very practical. What would you recommend? Just kind of almost a lightning round recommendation, you know, what would be either the resources, the journals, or or what would you recommend to a student to get a career in this field? And if you want to real quick add to that, if you're willing, you know, how they could contact you, that would be wonderful. And we can follow with that information also. I told you I was going to hybridize this. The other one, a student asked, how do you stay committed and motivated? I'm asking, this is tough. I'm pitching you this hyper practical, how do you do it? And then how do you stay committed and motivated? But I know you can handle that. And why don't we just have each of you take a shot at that?
Okay. My resource, if you guys are Price students, use the faculty. They are amazing, and use the network. It's real. I thought it was like a total bogus selling point when I was looking for graduate schools, the network part, but it's very real. I moved across the country just specifically to work with Dr. Sloan and Dr. Lewis, but every faculty member at Price is amazing, and you should really use them for their resources and their wealth of knowledge, and get to know people. How do I stay motivated and in this work? This stuff is like, I just like live and breathe this at this point. This work, it was so appalling to me what I sort of uncovered. I had such a long trajectory as a scientist that I was like completely politically blind to everything else in the world. I did grow up in a really low income but white household, and it's just like not something I learned. And like, so once I learned about the injustices of the world, it's just like a thing I can't unsee. That motivates me. Although I will say that this work is long and it's hard and it is nonstop. It's like literally 24/7, especially right now, there's something terrible happening every time you breathe. And so taking time for self-care and having somewhat of a balance is also really helpful. The way that I do it is I like to go out into nature where my phone doesn't work, but also just, having like an hour or two of fresh air just brings me back to this. And then keeping my network alive. So, keeping up with all the faculty that I worked with and learned from, and my peers at Price, they help motivate me as well because everybody is so inspiring. So, and you can contact me via my email address. Do you want me to, can we email it to people?
What we could do, we can
type it in the chat.
Terrence,
Okay.
are you ready? Were you going to jump in on something on there?
I was going to say, if you can provide that to me, which I already have, I'll actually send it out to all participants afterwards.
Okay, yeah, anybody can contact me. I love my job and my career. I love USC Price, and I'm always happy to talk to anybody.
Yeah, so we can get a follow-up set of information to you. I'll tell you what, Aida, I'll go to you next, but before I do that, Dom Aleto's put a really interesting set of information in your chat box. Take a look at that, click on some of those links, be in touch with the Career Services Office. And Aida?
So I just want to make sure I'm capturing the question. A tactical recommendation.
Yeah.
A personal one, and then if you can, so you can absolutely contact me, and please, I'll go backwards, so you can absolutely contact me. It's already been sort of intimated, but this is my life, so it's not really something that I get to choose and pick as a Black woman. This is, and as a mother, like my life and my children's lives depend on us being free. And so, we have nothing to lose but our chains, as Sister Sadish says. So, there's collective community care, there's self-care, there's so many ways to replenish, to Jackie's point. And I find, and I guess this leads to my tactical recommendation, there's healing power in really learning history and telling the truth. And for me, one thing I would say, like, again, adding to Jackie's point, the faculty is unbelievable, lean heavily on that, and learn the history. Like, we're on Tongva territory if you're in LA, right? Learn about the history of this land, learn about, like, combine what you're learning with history, with the untold histories. It is liberating, it gives us language, and, it helps us think differently. And I'm not a planner, I'm a policy person, but I know, even from like the way freeways were designed, right? Like, there's just a lot that has deeper, sort of context that I would encourage all of you to go deeper. That's sort of my tactical recommendation.
Thank you, thank you. We're coming up on about 2 minutes. So tactical recommendations and/or any advice about how to stay motivated. And I think we'll go to Jessica, Lamika, and Richard.
Okay, I'll be quick. Yes, you can absolutely contact me. I agree with both Jackie and Aida with, if you're fueled by this, then you don't necessarily need to refuel or look for fuel. You just need good mental health to keep you level. And so, I became a runner in May. I woke up one day and I said, I need to just run. And I started running. And now that's what I do as a release, right? And so finding new habits and getting yourself outside of your comfort zone, when you recognize it, it gets heavy. The work can get heavy. And if you're not that passionate about it, be big enough to say, this might not be the path for me. And in terms of tactical and really tangible resources, I'll reiterate what I said before. Get outside of your box. They call me a non-traditional planner. I used to get so annoyed by it, but now I'm like, fine, whatever. That's fine. I don't care, but you can do this work, and this work needs to be done across sectors, across industries. And even with your degrees in policy or planning or public administration, there's room for crossover, and all of the information that you've learned at Price will help you carry forward. There's also a lot of different spaces where you can get engaged in boards, get engaged in your alumni associations. We have a Trojan Women's Network I'm the outreach chair for, so I'll just put a little plug. But I've had some really uncomfortable conversations. I introduced the theme last year, inclusive access to exclusive spaces. And we went into exclusive social clubs around LA with a diverse group of people to try to kind of force conversations about the lack of diversity. And we're gonna keep doing that work next year. So it's not just in your career, right? It's not just in these specific spaces. Find other ways to tap into those interests. And then absolutely, like Aida said, you have to get smart on it. It starts with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Lamika?
Yes, I would agree, and I'll try to keep it brief too. To add on to what other folks have said, I mentioned earlier starting this work while you're a student. Literally every single project that I had, I made into a practicum project or, capstone or whatever you want to call it, type of project. So every time we had to do some kind of theoretical whatever, like, do an assessment, a community plan update for such and such community, I would actually be like, hey, group, let's go to there's a nonprofit organization in South LA called X, Y, and Z organization, Trust South LA, SAGE, whatever. And I bet they could use some free consultation from some graduate students at USC. Why don't we go and actually partner with them? And so I had the opportunity to build relationships with so many different nonprofit organizations that I had not connected with before. And some of them I knew from before in my community organizing background, and was able to provide them with like really brilliant students from USC who had all these amazing free tools that we could use, right? Quantitative analytical skills that we would otherwise be paying for these programs if we weren't students, and now we have them for free and we can offer it to these organizations for free. I did that with every single class. It gives you experience, it gives the organization some really excellent insight and support. One of the reports that I did just as a student at USC went to city council as they were considering the, I have never set foot on this area, but in USC, the mall thing, what is it called?
Quad.
Is that what it's called? The quad. I still have not been there to this day, but I did a whole assessment with the community where that new development is, right? With the Trader Joe's and Target and all of that, to say, hey, y'all haven't included the community in this, and this is very problematic. And so I've actually talked to the community as part of my research at USC. And then this nonprofit presented it to city council as part of their recommendations to say, hey, this is what some USC students are saying. And they've actually used these quantitative and like ran regressions on stuff. And so, oh, y'all don't do that though, sorry, planners. So, right, but.
They do.
Oh, you do? No, I didn't do regressions in my planning classes. That's awesome.
Times are changing.
This is great. The point though, right, is that you don't have to wait until you become, until you go back into the working world, if you're not working as a student anyway, to do this work. You can do this as a research assistant like I did. I also worked with Professor Lewis and Professor Sloan, which was great. And then they helped me give opportunities in other research institutions, but really taking your classes and saying, I'm going to do more with my classes, right? I can do this theoretically, or I could actually do it for real, like for real, and I can do it in a way that benefits the community in ways that, if I just kept this as a theoretical project, wouldn't happen. And so for my students in my classes, I actually require it. I'm like, here's a list of organizations, which one you want to work with. It's a requirement for all of my students. So that's what I'll say. And of course, y'all can reach out to me. Faith, spiritual, all of that stuff is what keeps me grounded, and being involved in Black Lives Matter and fighting for Black liberation.
Thank you. Richard.
Yes, as someone who grew up in the old university village, I thank you, Professor Castillo, for bringing that up. I miss that theater. I would just say I'm working on a little document for Marlon, and I've been caught up with this book called The Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Maree. I heard her give a talk. I performed right after she did this keynotes for this conference, and it was so great. And she talked about that the work of community organizers is science fiction behavior. Now, as she talked about that, as we're doing community organizing work, we're literally trying to create worlds that we have not yet imagined. And the world that we're currently living in, it's with someone's imagination. So that framework and mindset lets me know that for me, my art and my visionary thinking, it's exactly what's going to get us and our communities to get there. And so, and what keeps me motivated, again, it's my art. Dance is my first passion. I learned how to dance before I learned how to walk. And so that is for me, I think about a lot of the time as planning as the choreography of the city. And this sort of metaphor allowed me to then teach a class at the University of Redlands called the choreography in the city. And we had so much fun with that. And but the thing that I bring with me are these stories, the untold stories. So I think about the moment where the cashier at the liquor store down my block called me chula. Now, chula is the feminine form of the word chulo, which is Spanish for cutie. But to be seen as a feminine person in the hood, as a queer brown person, that is a story that I bring with me at every table that I get invited to, because those are the stories that we don't hear about. Those are the nuances that explain in which there's intersection and that there's story and passion within place. So those are the things that keep me motivated. Also being very aligned and finding joy as a form of my own revolution and healing. So all those things are there, and that's how they bring me together. And I always think about, like, for me, I've been thinking, I think a lot about my own death, and thinking that when I die, I've been asked, what will my eulogy say? And I said nothing, because my work will speak for itself. And so I always think about leaving behind a work ethic that I am proud of and allowing my legacy to speak more. I'm interested in the healing of soil and not in the accolades of flesh. And I've left my email and all my social media handles. They're all different. I get followed by planners Twitter on Twitter, and then my Instagram is like very artsy and it's a lot. So it's all there. You are more than free to contact me in any way. I am part of this community and this network, so I'm here to be of service.
Thank you all of you. This is just fantastic. Thank you for taking this time to share with us. Jessica, Jackie, Lamika, Aida, Richard, thank you so much. We have gone a few minutes over time. I apologize to the students for that. This is the first of 8 panels focused on professional development. Keep an eye out for the flyer. The next topic will be smart cities. We will be bringing 4 smart cities and data professionals to you, all of them women. So don't think that this is a field that is gendered. Okay, I just want to put that out there. I had to say it. And so stay in touch, be in touch with the Office of Career Services. Thank you so much to our panel. And if we could have maybe a round of virtual applause. Thank you. We are done. You can log off. Bye-bye.
All right, thanks everybody.
Bye, thanks everybody.
Bye, thank you.